The land of Ashira had once been lush, with green fields and thick groves of mango trees. But for 3 summers no rain had come. The rivers thinned to ribbons of dust, the soil cracked, and the villagers of Ashira survived on whatever their hands could coax from the hard ground. In such times, every grain was precious, every meal a ritual. And at the center of that ritual was clay. Clay pots lined every hearth, small ones for porridge, broad ones for stew, tall ones for storing water. The elders said the village itself was born of clay, for the first ancestor had shaped a pot, filled it with food and shared it with others. To break a pot carelessly was to break memory, to offend both the ancestors and the living. In one corner of the village lived a girl named Amara. She was no older than 17, her hands calloused from grinding millet, her back bent from hauling water. Yet her spirit was not bent. Where others despaired, Amara found ways to smile, to help. She shared her meager portion with the children who cried at night from hunger. She sang softly when the old ones sat by their empty bowls, her voice carrying a strange comfort. But not everyone welcomed her kindness. Her stepmother, Lela, saw it as defiance. To Lela, Amara was a reminder of a wife who had died too young, leaving behind a child who was not hers. Though Amara did every chore asked of her, Lela's eyes found fault. Too slow, she would snap. Too careless. If the millet burned, it was Amara's hand that ruined it. If the goat strayed, it was Amara's feet that wandered. And when food was short, as it always was, Amara was given the scraps. Each evening, the family gathered around their clay pots, lifting lids and breathing in the faint scent of broth or porridge. Amara's portion was never taken from the smooth, whole vessels. Instead, Lela would thrust a cracked pot toward her, one the family no longer used. "Eat from this," she would say, eyes hard. "It suits you." The pot was broken along its rim, its sides scarred with chips. Its surface had dulled and faint lines crept across it like old wounds. The others would wrinkle their noses at it as though its cracks might leap into their own bowls. But Amara accepted it silently, bowing her head. She ate from the broken pot night after night, even when the millet at the bottom was burnt, even when the stew was thinned to water. And though her stomach ached, she never complained. To her the pot was not shame. It was endurance. Still whispers followed her. Children giggled behind their hands, calling her the girl of the broken pot. Elders pitied her, but none dared challenge Lela, for the woman's tongue was sharper than any blade. Yet as Amara bent over the broken vessel, spooning small bites into her mouth, she sometimes felt it was not entirely silent. On the quietest nights, when wind brushed through the clay huts and the moonlight touched the cracks, she thought she heard a faint hum deep within the pot. So low it might have been her own hunger twisting in her ears. So soft it might have been nothing at all. But Amara listened. And though she told no one, a seed of curiosity lodged in her heart. For in a village where hunger gnawed at every soul, even a broken pot might carry secrets worth keeping. The drought did not break, and with each passing moon, the village's patience thinned like the broth in their pots. Fields yielded only brittle stalks, goats grew gaunt and quarrels flared where once there had been unity. In such times, cruelty found fertile ground. Lela, Amara's stepmother, sharpened her tongue as if it were a knife. To the other villagers she wore the face of a grieving widow, a woman burdened with children and hardship. But within the walls of her hut, she let her bitterness flow freely, and it always found its way toward Amara. The girl rose before dawn to fetch water, her clay jar heavy on her shoulders. She ground millet until her arms trembled. She scrubbed the cooking pots until her nails cracked. And still Lela found reason to scold. "You waste more than you save," she hissed one morning, snatching the broom from Amara's hands. "Do you sweep for the ancestors or for yourself? Look at this floor, dust everywhere." Amara bowed her head, though the hut floor was nearly spotless. She knew better than to answer. To argue was to invite harsher punishment. The neighbors noticed. They saw the girl working long after the others rested, carrying heavier loads than any child should. Some whispered pity, others shook their heads. But no one stepped in. It was not their household, they told themselves. Every family had its quarrels. Yet what set Amara apart was the strange light that followed her even in hardship. When she returned from the fields, she carried bundles of wild greens others had overlooked. When she helped the children search for berries, somehow her hands found more than theirs. The elders remarked that millet seemed to cook sweeter in her pot than in anyone else's. "She is blessed," one woman murmured at the well. "The spirits favor her." Lela overheard, and her heart tightened with envy. To her, Amara's small blessings were insults. Every kind word spoken of the girl was a shadow cast upon herself and her own daughters. That evening, as the family gathered around the fire, Lela handed Amara her meal last as always. The portion was small, scooped hurriedly from the bottom of the pot where the grains clung. But instead of placing it in a normal bowl, she brought forth the cracked vessel again. The broken pot. Her daughters giggled. Why must she always eat from that old thing? Because it suits her, Lela snapped, her voice sharp enough to silence them. A pot that leaks. A girl that leaks luck from our house. The words stung more than the hunger in Amara's belly. Still, she took the vessel quietly as if it were a crown rather than a curse. But Lela was not satisfied with humiliation alone. Soon she began to twist small accidents into accusations. If a goat wandered too far, it was Amara's fault. If water spilled on the path, it was her clumsy hand. Even when rain clouds gathered and drifted away without blessing the soil, Lela muttered, the spirits turned because of her. Her daughters followed their mother's example, mocking Amara when no one else was near. They hid her tools, tossed pebbles into her grain, and laughed when she worked late into the night to correct their sabotage. Through it all, Amara endured in silence. Yet in her silence, something stirred. When she bent her head over the broken pot, spooning meager food into her mouth, the faint hum she had once imagined seemed to grow louder. Not enough to form words, not yet, but enough to prickle her skin. It was as though the pot itself had begun to notice her suffering. Lela, blind in her cruelty, never thought to wonder why Amara's gaze lingered on the cracked vessel, or why her hands rested on it with a strange gentleness. To her, it was nothing but a broken dish. To Amara, it was beginning to feel like the only thing in the house that truly listened. And in the silence of that listening, the seeds of change were quietly taking root. That night, the wind carried no coolness. It pressed hot and heavy against the huts, seeping into the cracks, making sleep restless. Amara lay on her mat, her stomach hollow, her eyes tracing the wavering glow of the fire's last embers. Beside her lay the cracked pot. Lela had tossed it aside after the meal, muttering that it cluttered the floor. Amara, as she often did, had pulled it close. Though it bore no food now, she rested her hand against its jagged rim as if it were a friend. At first, she thought the humming was the hum of her own weariness, that low ringing in the ears that comes when hunger dulls the body. But then it grew, gentle at first, like a thread of music carried through clay. Amara sat up, her breath caught. The sound was real. The pot hummed. She leaned closer. The vibration deepened, echoing like a drum struck far away, the notes stretching into something layered, something alive. Then came the voices. Soft, like whispers through water, they rose within the pot. Not one voice, but many, weaving together, breaking apart, joining again. We see you, child of silence, child of the broken one. Amara clutched her mat. Who speaks? Her voice was no louder than a breath. The hum swelled, and a low chuckle threaded through the air. We are the forgotten. We are the ones poured out, never filled. We are those whose hunger never ended. And we remember. Her skin prickled. The broken pot, chipped and dull, seemed to glow faintly in the fire's dying light. She wanted to pull away, to flee, yet something in the voices held her. They were not cruel. They were heavy, sad, powerful, ancient. She swallowed hard. Why speak to me? Because you listen, the voices answered. The others mock, the others scorn, but you place your hands on the wound of clay and hear its ache. You eat from what is broken and make no complaint. You are chosen to carry what others cast aside. Amara's heart thudded against her ribs. Chosen? She was the one everyone laughed at, the one forced to the scraps. She was no one. But the voices pressed on. Child, do not mistake the broken for useless. Cracks let memory escape. Cracks let truth be heard. The hum deepened, resonating through her bones. And for the briefest instant, she saw shapes in the shadows of her hut. Faces flickering along the walls, faces of women and men she did not know, their mouths moving in silent cries. When she blinked, they were gone, leaving only the pot's low tremor. Amara curled her arms around herself. What do you want of me? Only to be remembered, the voices said. Only to be heard. And when the time comes, you will speak for us. The fire sputtered and went out, plunging the hut into darkness. Yet the pot glowed faintly, lines of light threading its cracks, as if embers had lodged within. Amara lay awake the rest of the night, the pot beside her humming like a lullaby that was too heavy to soothe. At dawn, when the roosters called, she rose and carried the pot outside to fetch water. The other girls at the well giggled, pointing. Still eating from that old thing? It will crumble in your hands. Amara ignored them, dipping the pot into the shallow pool. As the water filled it, the hum grew again, almost eager, almost alive. She pressed her hand against the side, and for a heartbeat she thought she felt the pulse of a heart within. She walked back with steady steps. Her mind raced, yet her face revealed nothing. For the first time she carried not just a broken pot but a secret. And though she did not yet know it, that secret was about to change everything in Ashira. The days passed, each one as dry and heavy as the last. Dust curled along the paths, goats pawed at empty troughs, and the villagers' faces grew hollow. But within Amara's hut, something stirred each night, a sound only she could hear. The broken pot no longer hummed in secret. Whenever she touched it, the vibration swelled as though it recognized her hand. Sometimes it was gentle like a lullaby. Other times it rose sharp and restless, a chorus of voices pressing against her skin. One evening, when the moon hung thin as a blade, the voices grew stronger than ever. Amara sat alone, the cracked vessel resting in her lap. The others had finished their meal and gone to sleep, leaving her with scraps as always. She dipped her spoon into the pot. The millet was cold, sticky, but as she lifted it to her mouth, the hum surged until it filled the whole hut. The air thickened, shadows quivered on the walls. "We will show you," the voices intoned. The walls seemed to fade and Amara's breath caught. In their place rose a scene she had never known. A woman kneeling at the riverbank, clay coating her arms to the elbow. She was shaping a pot, smoothing its sides with practiced care. But her eyes were red, her shoulders trembling. Amara leaned closer, heart pounding. The woman looked up, and though her lips did not move, her voice echoed through Amara's mind. "They called me wasteful. They said I could not feed my children. They shattered my pot, and I starved with none to hold water or grain. I died before the rains returned, but my cry lived on." The image dissolved into another. This time a young boy, thin as a reed, clutching a cracked bowl. His voice joined the chorus. "They mocked me for eating from broken clay. They laughed as hunger hollowed me. When I died, the earth drank my tears." Amara pressed her hands over her ears, but the voices pierced through. One by one they came, men, women, children, faces flickering, their stories a river of sorrow. Each had been wronged, discarded, forgotten. And all had clung to clay as their last witness. Tears blurred Amara's eyes. "Why show me this? I cannot change what was done." The hum softened, like many hands resting gently on her shoulders. "Because you can carry us. Because you know the sting of being cast aside, yet you do not harden. The broken pot remembers us, and through you so will they." The light faded and the hut returned. The fire was low, the air still. Only the pot remained, faintly glowing along its cracks. Amara set it carefully on the floor, her hands trembling. Her heart was torn between fear and awe. The voices were not curses, they were truths. And truths once spoken had power. But she also knew, if anyone discovered what she had seen, they would not call her blessed. They would call her cursed. In a village where hunger ruled and fear thrived, who would believe the pot spoke with the voices of the dead? Amara wrapped her arms around her knees, rocking herself in the silence that followed. She whispered a promise only the pot could hear: "I will not let you be forgotten." The vessel answered with a low hum, steady as a heartbeat. And though she did not yet understand its full meaning, Amara sensed that the broken pot was no longer just a symbol of her shame. It was a vessel of memory, a mouth for the voiceless, and it had chosen her to carry their stories into the world. The drought dragged on, its grip merciless. Crops withered, cattle grew thin, and the air itself seemed parched. Villagers muttered darkly about omens, blaming shadows and whispers for every ill. In such times, suspicion needed only a spark to become fire. Amara kept her secret close. At night, she listened to the hum of the broken pot, to the faint voices that rose like smoke from its cracks. They did not come every evening, but when they did, they filled her with both dread and courage. She had begun to hear their stories in greater detail, tragedies threaded with lessons, grief braided with warning. Though she wanted to share them, fear kept her silent. But secrets, no matter how carefully hidden, leave traces. One morning Lela, her stepmother, stormed into the hut, her face sharp as a blade. "Why is the pot still here?" she hissed, pointing at the cracked vessel. "I told you to throw it into the ash heap days ago." Amara froze. "It still holds food," she said softly. "Why waste what can still serve?" Lela's eyes narrowed. "Food tastes foul in broken clay. I have warned you about clinging to useless things." Her gaze lingered on the pot, a flicker of unease crossing her features. "And I hear you, girl. Whispering to yourself when you think all sleep. What tricks do you play in my house?" I only speak to keep my heart steady," Amara stammered, lowering her head. But Lella's suspicion grew. Over the following days she watched Amara with hawk-like eyes. When Amara carried water, Lella followed. When Amara spread grain to dry, Lella lingered nearby. Each time Amara laid a hand on the pot, even in passing, Lella's lips tightened as though tasting bitterness. Then one night the voices came strong. Amara had barely lifted her bowl when the hum rose like a drumbeat. Shadows bent on the walls, shaping the outline of figures long gone. She pressed her hand to the pot to quiet it, but the resonance only deepened. "They betrayed me," one voice groaned, heavy with sorrow. "They broke my vessel and left me thirsting until I crumbled." Another voice joined, sharp and accusing. "They laughed when I begged for scraps. They left me hollow." Amara whispered back, "Hush please, they will hear you." But another sound cut through, the rustle of cloth at the doorway. Amara spun around. There stood Lella, her face pale in the moonlight, her eyes wide with fear and fury. "You dare bring spirits into my house?" Lella spat. She stormed forward, seizing the pot with both hands. "This is filth, curse work, nothing but rot. I will smash it once and for all." "No!" Amara cried, lunging forward. But she was too late. Lella raised the pot high, ready to dash it against the ground. Before it could shatter, a deep hum burst from its cracks, vibrating so violently that Lella staggered. The sound filled the hut like thunder trapped inside walls. The pot glowed faintly, and in its light, shadows of the forgotten dead flickered, their faces grim. Lella shrieked, dropping the vessel. It did not break. Instead, it landed softly as if the earth itself caught it. The humming stopped, leaving only silence. Amara rushed forward, cradling the pot. Her heart hammered in her chest, but she felt no fear from the vessel. Instead, warmth spread through her fingers, steady and protective. Lella backed away, her voice trembling with rage. "You witch! You consort with the dead. No wonder misfortune plagues this house. You would drag us all into ruin." "They chose me," Amara whispered, more to herself than to her stepmother. "Not to curse, but to remember." Lella's face hardened. "Do not speak your poison to me. Tomorrow the village will hear of this. Let them decide whether you should stay among the living." With that, she fled the hut, leaving Amara clutching the pot in the dim glow of the embers. Amara's chest ached. She had always known her stepmother's cruelty, but now it had sharpened into something more dangerous. Fear disguised as righteousness. Fear could move a crowd, twist truth into lies, turn neighbor against neighbor. She pressed her forehead to the pot. "What will they do to me?" she whispered. The vessel hummed faintly, almost like a sigh. The voices did not speak in words, but she felt their meaning. "You are not alone. We have been cast out too. But through you our stories breathe again." Amara wept quietly, rocking the pot as though it were a child. She did not know what tomorrow would bring. But deep in her chest, amid the fear, burned a fragile ember of resolve. The broken pot had refused to break. And maybe, just maybe, so would she. Morning came with the sound of voices outside the hut. Amara stirred from uneasy sleep, clutching the broken pot to her chest. When she stepped outside, blinking into the harsh sunlight, she saw villagers gathered in a restless circle. At their center stood Lella, her stepmother, her voice sharp and trembling with both fury and triumph. "She keeps a cursed vessel," Lella cried, pointing toward Amara. "I heard it with my own ears, whispers of the dead rising from a pot she hides in our house. What plague is this but her doing? What hunger but her fault?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. The drought had thinned tempers and sharpened suspicion. People shifted uneasily, their eyes flicking from Lella's wild gestures to Amara's pale, silent face. Amara's heart thudded. She wanted to shout the truth, that the pot was no curse but a vessel of remembrance. But fear locked her tongue. An elder, old Kofi with a staff as gnarled as his hands, raised his voice. "Girl, is this true? Do you keep a broken pot that sings in the night?" The villagers leaned forward. Amara swallowed hard. She held out the vessel, its cracks glowing faintly in the sun as though lit from within. "It is broken," she admitted, her voice low but steady. "But it is not cursed. It hums with voices, yes. But they are voices of memory, of stories forgotten. They do not harm. They remind." A gasp fluttered through the crowd. Lella spat at the ground. "Lies. Do you not see how she twists her tongue? Spirits should be laid to rest, not called into our homes. Already the land starves. Already the children thirst. What else could it be but her devil's toy?" Another villager, a woman named Suri, frowned. "But the girl has always been kind. She shares what little food she finds. Why would she bring harm to us?" "Because evil wears a sweet mask," Lela hissed, her eyes flashing. Because envy sits in her heart. She would see me dishonored, my household ruined. She feeds off shadows and now she would feed on us. The crowd's muttering grew louder, torn between doubt and suspicion. Some nodded at Lela's words, desperate for a scapegoat. Others shifted uneasily, remembering Amara's quiet generosity. Amara felt the weight of their stares pressing down. Her hands trembled as she clutched the pot tighter. She wanted to tell them everything, the voices, the warmth, the comfort it gave her in the dark. But would they hear her? Or would they only hear the echo of her stepmother's rage? Then unexpectedly the pot gave a low hum. The sound was gentle, like a distant song carried on the wind. The villagers froze, their eyes widening. From the cracks, faint light spilled, curling across Amara's arms like threads of fireflies. Children gasped and drew closer, eyes wide with wonder. "It sings," one whispered. "It sings like the river used to." But Lela shrieked, her fear curdling into fury. "Do you not see? This is witchcraft. The dead cling to her, and if we do not drive her out, they will cling to us all." Kofi leaned heavily on his staff, his brow furrowed. Perhaps the ancestors are not angry but speaking. In times of drought we forget the old stories. Perhaps she has been chosen. Chosen? Lela's voice cracked with disbelief. Chosen to shame me, to steal my place? She is no chosen one, she is a curse dressed as a daughter. The crowd stirred, divided, fear and wonder battling in their eyes. Some stepped back uncertain. Others looked at Amara with something like reverence. Amara's throat tightened. She had not asked for this. She had not wanted it. Yet here she stood, the voices of the broken pot thrumming through her veins, their echoes stronger than her own fear. She lifted the vessel high, her voice trembling but clear. "If I am cursed, then let the curse fall upon me alone," she said. "But if I am chosen, then it is not for my sake, it is for all of us. Listen." The pot hummed louder, rising into a chord that filled the air. The sound was mournful and beautiful, a harmony of voices that seemed older than stone. The villagers fell silent, the anger in the air thinning into awe. Only Lela stood rigid, her fists clenched, her face pale with fury. She glared at Amara as though the sight of her burned. Amara lowered the pot, her arms aching. "I do not seek power. I only wish to remember. The voices do not curse, they guide. But you must choose whether to hear them." Silence stretched, heavy and fragile. The villagers looked from Lela to Amara, torn between fear and hope. And in that silence, Amara knew her stepmother's hatred would not rest. The day had begun with accusation. It ended with a question hanging over the village: was Amara cursed, or chosen? That night the hut felt smaller than ever. Amara sat with the pot cradled in her lap, listening to the faint hum vibrating through its cracks. Outside, the village lay unsettled, neighbors whispering in clusters, firelight flickering on uneasy faces. Some believed her cursed, others chosen, but none could rest easily after what they had witnessed. Amara stroked the pot's rim with trembling fingers. "What am I to do?" she whispered. "I cannot fight them. I cannot flee. If you have made me keeper, then speak plainly, what is it you want of me?" The pot vibrated and the cracks glowed faintly. Then the voices came. They were stronger now, clearer than before. "We are not curses," murmured the first, a woman's voice threaded with sorrow. "We are those who were broken, forgotten. This village was built on our backs, yet our names were scattered like dust. You, child, are the first to listen." Amara closed her eyes, breathing deeply. "Then tell me, what is it you wish remembered?" The voices deepened, overlapping like a river's roar. Images rushed into her mind, fields once green and wide, a river that ran deep, harvests that filled the people with laughter. But alongside the beauty came shadows: betrayal, injustice, cruelty. She saw a man clutching coins while neighbors starved. She saw a child abandoned because her cry was deemed unlucky. She saw a woman beaten until she vanished into the hills, her name never spoken again. Amara gasped and drew back. "These are not just stories," she whispered. "These are truths." "Yes," the voices echoed. "Truths buried, silenced. The drought is not only of water but of memory. The earth shrinks because the people have shrunk in spirit. Their cruelty breeds famine. Their forgetting breeds thirst. We remember what they wish forgotten." Amara's heart hammered. The weight of these revelations pressed hard on her chest. "If I speak these things aloud, they will hate me more than ever," she murmured. "They already hate what they do not understand," the pot replied, its hum steady. "But you cannot carry our voices and remain silent. To be keeper is to bear the fire of memory, even when it burns." A tear slid down Amara's cheek. She had long been used to her stepmother's cruelty, but this was larger. She was being asked to hold not just her own pain, but the pain of generations. She pressed her forehead against the pot. "I am only one girl." "And so were we," whispered the voices, softer now, tender. "Each of us was only one. Alone we were broken. Together we endure. And through you we will be heard." The air in the hut thickened, alive with the hum. Amara felt heat spreading through her chest, not burning but warming like embers lit beneath the ribs. It was not power she felt, not in the way her stepmother feared, but it was strength, quiet and immovable. A sudden knock shattered her stillness. The door swung open and Suri, the woman who had defended her earlier, stepped inside. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. "Amara," she whispered, glancing at the glowing pot. "Is it true? Do the voices speak of what has been hidden?" Amara hesitated. Trust was a fragile thing easily shattered. But she saw something in Suri's eyes, not suspicion but desperation. A hunger for truth. "They do," Amara said softly. "They tell of wrongs buried by silence. They remember what others would rather forget." Suri's eyes brimmed with tears. She dropped to her knees. "Then listen well. Ask if they remember my child. She was taken from me in the night, years ago. They said she wandered off. But I know something darker happened." Amara clutched the pot tighter. Slowly she whispered, "Tell me, do you remember this loss?" The pot vibrated. A low hum rose, filling the hut with a sorrow so heavy it made Amara's chest ache. Then the voices spoke. "We remember the child who cried too loudly. We remember how hands silenced her. She was left in the reeds where the river once flowed." Suri's body shook. She pressed her face into her hands, a muffled sob tearing from her throat. "It's true," she wept. "I knew it. I knew they lied." Amara placed a trembling hand on her shoulder. The voices fell silent, leaving only the echo of grief in the room. Suri lifted her tear-streaked face. "You must tell the village. You must speak all that they hide. The people need to hear, even if it tears us apart." Amara looked down at the pot. Its faint glow pulsed like a heartbeat, steady and insistent. The burden of truth pressed heavier on her than ever, but she knew now, silence would no longer be possible. For the first time she spoke not to the pot but to herself. "If I must carry their voices, then I will not carry them quietly. I will make them heard." The hum grew, filling the room like a quiet vow. The village gathered that evening in the central clearing, a fire smoldering weakly at its heart. Its flames sputtered as though it, too, thirsted for water. Men, women, and children pressed close, whispering among themselves, their eyes darting toward Amara as she stepped into the circle. In her hands she carried the broken pot, its cracks faintly glowing in the dusk. Her stepmother stood across from her, face twisted with fury and pride. "Now," Lela declared, her voice carrying like a blade, "let the people see the truth. Let her cursed vessel speak its poison before us all." The villagers murmured in agreement, though unease rippled through them. Suri lingered near the front, her eyes swollen from weeping but fixed on Amara with fierce trust. Amara's heart pounded as she set the pot on the ground. For a moment she wondered if the voices would come at all, if perhaps she had only dreamed them. The silence stretched, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Then, softly at first, the hum began. It started as a low vibration in the earth, a sound that made the villagers' sandals shift uneasily on the dust. Then it rose, weaving into a melody mournful and deep. The cracks of the pot glowed brighter, casting pale light across the faces of those who dared lean close. The voices came. "We remember," they said, the sound echoing like many voices speaking as one. "We remember the fields once green, the river once full. We remember the children who laughed, the feast that fed all. We remember, and we remember what was done." The crowd stiffened. The fire bent low as though listening. "We remember the child cast into the reeds, her cries silenced by hands that feared her hunger. We remember the woman who bled beneath blows, her name swallowed by shame. We remember the grain hoarded in secret while neighbors starved. We remember the night of betrayal when a brother stole from his kin." Gasps burst through the crowd. Faces blanched. Some villagers glanced at one another in horror, others covered their mouths with trembling hands. Suri wept openly, falling to her knees. "They speak truth. My child, they speak of my child." A murmur of pity spread, though it quickly twisted into fear. If the voices remembered that, what else might they reveal? The pot glowed brighter, and the hum sharpened into accusation. We remember, and we will not forget again." The villagers broke into chaos. Some shouted for the pot to be destroyed. Others begged for silence. A few cried out prayers, covering their ears. Through it all, Lella's voice rose like a whip. Do you see? She has brought shame and unrest upon us all. She holds a vessel that rips open wounds better left closed. It is a curse, not a blessing. But Amara, standing at the edge of the light, felt the voice's pulse within her chest. She raised her hands. No, she shouted, her voice ringing clear above the noise. It is not curse, it is truth. We live in drought not only of water but of memory. We turn our faces from wrongs, burying them in silence, and wonder why the earth grows barren. This pot does not harm us, it shows us what we have done to ourselves. The villagers fell into uneasy silence, her words burning into them like sparks. But Lella's fury deepened. And who are you to speak so? You, a girl who eats from a broken bowl? You who would raise your voice above mine? Her face twisted and her voice cracked with venom. This is not truth, it is rebellion. You would shame your family, your mother, your blood. Amara's gaze locked on her stepmother. She felt the hum rise through her bones, steady and fierce. I would shame no one, she said softly. But I will no longer live in silence. If shame comes, it comes from what was done, not from what is remembered. The pot flared, light spilling out so bright it cast long shadows across the clearing. For an instant, figures appeared within the glow, faces of the forgotten, eyes filled with both grief and fire. The villagers shrank back, awe and terror knotting together in their throats. The hum faded slowly, leaving the night heavy and thick. The broken pot sat still, its cracks cooling to faint embers. No one moved. No one spoke. Only the crackle of the fire dared disturb the silence. At last, old Kofi lifted his staff. His voice was rough with age but steady. Perhaps the girl is right. Perhaps the earth withholds its waters not out of cruelty but out of truth. We have forgotten too much. Maybe it is time to listen. Some nodded slowly, their fear tempered with a fragile hope. Others turned away, muttering darkly. But none could deny what they had seen, or what they had heard. Amara bent to lift the pot, her arms trembling under the weight of more than clay. As she held it close, she felt the voices settle into silence, waiting. For the first time she did not feel afraid. She felt chosen. The night after the revelation, the village did not sleep. Clusters of neighbors whispered in corners, fires burned low, and the air itself felt restless. Amara lay awake in her hut, the pot beside her, its cracks pulsing faintly like the heartbeat of something ancient. She knew peace would not come easily. For though some villagers had begun to look at her with wonder, others looked with fear. And fear, when fanned, became dangerous. She heard it before she saw it, the scrape of footsteps outside, slow and deliberate. Amara sat upright, clutching the pot. The door creaked open, and in the firelit shadows stood her stepmother, Lella. Her eyes gleamed with cold fury. You think yourself chosen? She spat. A girl with no mother, no father, no worth? You think these people will follow you because of your tricks? Amara rose to her feet, heart pounding. They saw the truth. They heard it. The voices cannot lie. They are lies. Lella hissed, stepping closer. Voices of filth and shadow meant to turn them against me. Against my household. Against all order. Her hand darted forward, snatching for the pot. Amara pulled it back, but Lella's grip was fierce. They struggled, the vessel between them, its hum rising with the strain. Give it to me, Lella cried. I will smash it into dust. The pot vibrated violently, and then, without warning, a sharp crack of light burst from its seams. Lella staggered back, her hands scorched red, though no flame touched her. She screamed, clutching her palms, and fell to her knees. The hum deepened, filling the hut with a sound like a storm gathering. Shadows stretched along the walls, shaping into figures, the same spectral forms the villagers had seen before. Only now their faces turned toward Lella. We remember, they intoned, their voices heavy and unyielding. We remember cruelty. We remember hunger while food was hidden. We remember blows struck in anger. We remember the child forced to starve while her stepmother feasted. Lella shook her head violently. No, lies. All lies. But the voices did not falter. We remember the broken child mocked for her tears. We remember the pot she was forced to eat from. We remember your hand guiding her suffering. Amara stood frozen, her breath caught in her throat. She had never spoken these things aloud. Yet the voices laid them bare, every cruelty she had endured. Lella's face twisted in terror. She clawed at her ears as though she could block out the sound. Stop. Stop, she shrieked. I did what I must. I kept order. I kept control. But the voices only grew louder. You kept nothing but your own pride. You fed yourself with another's pain. You clothed yourself in another's sorrow. And now your hands burn with the weight of what you have done. The glow from the pot intensified, spilling over Lella's trembling form. The villagers, drawn by the cries, rushed to the hut, peering through the doorway. They saw Lella crouched on the ground, her hands red and blistered, her face twisted with fear. They saw Amara standing tall, the broken pot glowing in her arms like a star. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some whispered prayers. Others stared, wide-eyed, as the voices thundered one final truth. We remember the stepmother who thought herself beyond judgment. We remember. And so will they. Then just as suddenly the glow dimmed. The hum faded, leaving only silence. Lella collapsed, gasping for breath, her once proud figure shrunken and broken. The villagers entered, surrounding her, their faces pale with awe and disgust. Old Kofi leaned heavily on his staff. It seems judgment has already been given, he said quietly. Suri stepped forward, her gaze fixed on Lella. You accused her of curses, but it is you who brought cruelty into this house. The pot speaks only truth. The villagers murmured in agreement. Some reached toward Amara with reverence, others simply bowed their heads. Lella, trembling, lifted her burned hands. She bewitched it, she rasped. She bewitched all of you. But her words rang hollow. No one believed her anymore. The voices had spoken, and their truth was heavier than any lie she could weave. Amara stood silent, the pot warm against her palms. She did not gloat, did not smile. Her heart ached with the weight of what had just happened. Lella was cruel, yes, but seeing her broken on the floor filled Amara with no joy. Instead she whispered, the voices remember. And so must we. Let their stories guide us, not destroy us. The villagers nodded, some weeping quietly. And though Lella's fate was sealed by her own deeds, Amara's place among them was no longer uncertain. She was no longer the orphan mocked, no longer the girl forced to eat from a broken pot. She was the keeper of voices, the one chosen to hold the truth. The night ended not with punishment, but with silence heavy as stone, silence filled with remembrance. Dawn broke soft and golden over the village, painting the huts and fields with the light of renewal. The air felt cleaner, lighter, as if the night's heaviness had been washed away by the first rays of sun. Amara sat outside her hut, the broken pot resting in her lap. Its cracks no longer glowed, but a faint warmth lingered within, steady and alive. The villagers moved quietly around her, their glances filled not with pity or scorn but with a new kind of respect. Children tiptoed near, whispering, "That is her, the girl who carries the voices." Elders bowed their heads when they passed, and even the strongest men, once dismissive, lowered their eyes. Amara felt the weight of it all, not pride but responsibility. Suri came first, kneeling beside her. "The village has decided," she said softly. "You are no longer to be hidden in shadows. You are the keeper now. The voices chose you." Amara hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of the pot. "I am no leader. I am just a girl who was hungry, just a girl who suffered." Suri shook her head. "And that is why they chose you. The spirits do not seek those who hunger for power. They seek those who understand pain so they will never cause it." Her words settled deep in Amara's heart. She looked toward the square where villagers gathered around Lella. Her stepmother's burned hands were bound gently with cloth. She was not cast out nor beaten, but kept under watch, her authority stripped away. The punishment was not exile but living in the truth of her deeds. Old Kofi raised his staff. "Let it be known," his voice boomed, "that cruelty shall not rule here again. The girl who was mocked has become our guide. We will not forget the lessons the pot has sung." The crowd murmured their agreement. Some wept openly for shame or relief. That evening, the villagers lit a great fire in the center of the square. Not for celebration but for remembrance. They gathered in a wide circle, children at the front, elders behind, all facing Amara. She stepped forward, clutching the pot. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "This pot was once a tool of shame. I was forced to eat from it, mocked for its cracks. But it remembers everything, every tear, every cruelty, every truth we tried to hide. And when it spoke, it did not destroy me. It gave me strength." The pot began to hum softly, a low vibration that rippled through the air. The villagers leaned in, holding their breath. "Listen," Amara whispered. The hum grew clearer, forming into voices once again. But now they did not speak of cruelty. They told stories, of harvests long past, of festivals forgotten, of ancestors who had danced beneath the stars. They sang lullabies mothers once whispered to their children, and prayers once carried by the wind. The people gasped. Tears flowed freely, not from fear but from the sweetness of memory. For too long they had lived with silence, with secrets buried by cruelty. Now the voices returned, not as judgment, but as a bridge between past and future. Amara's eyes filled with tears. She held the pot close as if cradling a child. "The voices are not here only to punish," she said. "They are here to remind us who we are. They carry our pain, yes, but also our joy. We must not fear them. We must remember them." The villagers nodded, their faces softened by the glow of firelight. Children clapped their hands to the rhythm of the hum. Women swayed gently and men closed their eyes, drinking in the sound. From that night onward, the pot was no longer hidden. It was placed at the heart of the village in a shrine woven from reeds and flowers. Amara was named Keeper of the Voices, and she carried the duty with quiet grace. Whenever disputes arose, whenever cruelty threatened to rise again, the pot was brought forth. And the voices reminded all who listened of truth, raw and unchanging. Seasons passed and Amara grew into her role. She became not only a keeper but a healer. The same hands that once trembled from hunger now offered food to orphans. The same voice once silenced by cruelty now spoke with authority. And the villagers, once divided by fear, found unity in remembrance. Her stepmother lived on in shame, her hands scarred, her authority gone. Some pitied her, others despised her, but Amara bore no hatred. When she passed by, Amara would bow her head, not in respect for cruelty, but in acknowledgement that even those who harm us are part of the story the voices carry. Years later, when children asked why the pot was cracked, Amara would smile softly. "Because we are cracked too," she would say. "But through the cracks, the voices shine. Through the cracks, truth is heard." And so the broken pot became sacred. No longer a symbol of shame, but of remembrance. A vessel of voices, carrying both sorrow and joy, both warning and hope. Amara's name was spoken with reverence, but she never called herself more than what she was. A girl who had once been broken, made whole by what others had thrown away. And in the stillness of night, when she sat alone by the pot, the voices sometimes spoke only to her. They whispered her mother's laugh, her father's blessing, the love she had thought forever lost. And Amara wept, not in sorrow but in gratitude. For she knew she was never truly alone. The voices would carry her, and through her they would carry the village, long after her own voice had faded into memory.